Hello everyone, this is Sweetfield Manor, a quaint boutique hotel known for its picturesque grounds and strutting peacocks. And it's also just a stone's throw away from one of Barbados' UNESCO heritage sites, which has the Garrison Savannah, the Barbados Museum, and many other historic sites of interest, including St. Anne's Fort. I'm Belle Holder, a proud Barbadian, and I take this opportunity to say welcome everybody to our beautiful island paradise of Barbados. We are so honored to be the host country of UNCTAD 15, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. Although the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic means that most of you couldn't fly into Barbados to attend the conference, we still have the opportunity to welcome you to our home. We're going to link from you to us via online, and actually it probably means that even more of you could join us here in Barbados on your device, on your laptop, but you can be here with us for UNCTAD 15. The COVID-19 pandemic has certainly changed the way that we see the world, and as we go forward, it forces us to look at how we will need to build lasting relationships with our neighbors near and far. Our UNCTAD conversation with the Honorable Sandra Husbands, Minister in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, is straight ahead. Let's start on a personal note and how you and your loved ones have been navigating the COVID pandemic. How did it change you in a personal way? Did you make some adjustments in terms of even self-assessing?
A lot. What it did for me, it made you realize that sometimes you think of your family and the people immediately around you as the people who are the most important. And you don't realize the tremendous role of the people that you engage with on an everyday basis, whether it's the postman or whether it is people at work, that they form an integral part of what makes your life work and what makes you balanced and what causes you to feel at ease in your life. So that one of the things I noted was that when people were apart from their colleagues, when they saw their colleagues, they were chatting 19 to a dozen. Not that you didn't see them online. It is that human touch and human interaction is important. Yeah. So that was one thing that I thought came home very, very forcibly. I think the other thing that struck me a great deal was the fact that COVID was asking us as humans to recognize that the only way we can survive, thrive, or prosper is if we all do it together. And I don't know if countries, nations, individuals have recognized that when I wear my mask, I'm protecting you. When you wear your mask, you're protecting me. So we're both protected when we both think of each other. Yeah. Anytime there's that selfishness. And COVID also needed us as a people to lay down the anger and the conflict that you may have in families. It was amazing how in some families that dysfunction just could not be set aside in the interest of survival. And so it said to me that what the world and Barbados needs is to be able to rebuild the social values of caring, of understanding community and our responsibility, not just to ourselves and what we want, but our responsibility to community. And that unless we re-engage that, a lot of the other problems in the world cannot be solved, including some of the ones we're trying to deal with in UNCTAD.
Right. Well, we here in Barbados, we have the wonderful opportunity of being the host country for UNCTAD 15, although it will look a little different because everything is going to be online. But I'd like to always look at silver linings. So perhaps it means that people that, even if there was no COVID, that would have been still unable to attend, still have the opportunity to connect with us. You've played a leading role in the coordination of national and regional positions for the substantive negotiations of the conference. Yes. Tell us about that process and what it was like.
With UNCTAD, what we are negotiating are the issues that would be of importance to developing countries to shape the work program over the next 4 years. It has been a tremendous honor for Barbados to be able to be chair, because we will be the first SIDS small island developing state to ever do anything like this. And we are so conscious of the fact that we're going to be representing all of the other SIDS. So it was important for us in the negotiation to ensure that in that work program, it reflects the issues that are of importance to us as SIDS and as small developing countries, as developing countries in Africa. They may be large in terms of geography, but their developmental stage is still challenging. And so in the negotiations, it was important first for us to develop a CARICOM position. And our CARICOM ambassadors and officials and our experts worked together so well to pull together a document in a fashion that made me extremely proud as a CARICOM person to see what we could produce, how well we can articulate the issues that are critical to us. And then that process then takes it up to the G77 plus China group, which we are members of. You now have to negotiate with all of them to agree on that text, to agree on what should be included, how it should be stated, so that our needs and our concerns are reflected adequately in the wording, because this is going to shape the interpretation of how the UNCTAD Secretariat and their work teams actually work on those issues. So it must reflect that angle that is important to us. But after you do that, you now have to negotiate with the rest of the group of countries now, with our paper, with the other group of countries to agree on the text. And I'm very happy to report that even just today we heard that a couple of tough issues that we were holding out on, and Barbados was holding on it, that they finally have come up with some language that we can agree on. So I'm very pleased. There's the anticipation that we'll go into conference with almost everything completed.
Can you share with us what those issues were?
Well, one of the issues was the issue of vulnerability. Prime Minister has been in the forefront of pushing the issue of vulnerability, and that this should be taken into account when you are determining who can get aid, who can get developmental assistance, and what terms and conditions you offer. So that was one area that was a big struggle, because the bigger developed countries did not want to create new groupings, new sections of countries under another label that they have to deal with. So that was one of the areas that would have been a struggle. The other one was health and trade. Now, COVID, while being a health issue, is also a trade issue. What happened was our supply chains broke down. And what that meant, goods were scarce. And what happened as the world tried to recover and demand started to rise again, the production levels could not meet it. So it meant that there were shortages of a number of things. And it pressed home the need for food security, that every single country must deal with this agricultural sector in such a way at the national and regional levels to ensure that you do not find yourself in a position where you do not have food for your population. And then we all know the struggle we had with getting COVID supplies, whether it was the vaccine, the PPE, the ventilators, the scramble. You paid money, you ordered it. Yes, you'll get it in September. Another country comes and snatches it, and then you don't have access to it, even though you have the money you're willing to pay. And that was also a huge issue for us as well. And now what we have is a shortage of computer chips. And that means that production of cars will slow down and the cost of cars will rise. And then all of the other gadgets that we buy, whether it's the fridge, the stove, everything now that has a computer chip in it, the computers, you're going to find shortages are going to be occurring shortly. And that is something else that we have to face. Right. And the big one for Barbados was the animal feed. And that would have caused the price of chicken to rise because corn and soya went up in cost. And so this now jeopardizes protein and nutrition. So many things that happen internationally now will affect the ordinary citizen. And part of our job in foreign trade is to be able to navigate, alert, come up with options, negotiate with other countries as to how to approach it. So right now we are discussing with our CARICOM neighbors who can produce the corn and soya. Can you raise the production level to a place where the unit cost would drop sufficiently that we could switch and bi-regional, because this is one of the ways to solve the problem, to stabilize the cost of chicken, the cost of eggs, the cost of meat, milk, those basic things that must go on the Barbadian table to keep our population
It's interesting
healthy.
when you talk about those things that are manufactured internationally that we still need to function day to day, and it certainly brings into focus what you said at the beginning, which is in order to navigate the current pandemic and any crisis that you face, you have to do it together. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and talk about that word that you also mentioned, vulnerability, which is part of the theme for UNCTAD 15. We'll be right back. Today we are having an UNCTAD conversation with Minister Sandra Husbands. We mentioned the theme of UNCTAD 15, which is from inequality and vulnerability to prosperity for all. And that all is very, very, very key in there as well. What does that mean for you, that theme, and how do we navigate that process for our citizens?
The term inequality and vulnerability very much sums up what the countries of the developing world have experienced. We have a situation where our development would have been impacted significantly by the issues of colonization, which created the unequal trade relations which we have, the patterns that currently exist. So a simple thing like if you want to get goods from here to Africa, there are no cargo ships or planes going straight. If you want to get your goods to Africa, you have to send them north first and then send them south. And to get goods from them, it has to take the same pattern. So the patterns of trade have evolved around that colonial past. And what that has done, it has kept us at the level where we are constantly dealing in primary products or we're dealing with low value activities that cannot earn sufficiently to be able to provide for our citizens in the way that we would like to. And then secondly, because of certain inherent characteristics, we are vulnerable and will always be vulnerable. We're not going to be able to change the fact that because of our small size, we will ever be production sufficient by producing everything in 166 square miles.
I want to use an example, and it was something that you mentioned, because you mentioned the issues we had around PPE, for example,
Yes.
and procuring and making sure that we had what Barbados needed. I remember looking at some face shields that were coming in from China, of course, but same as you said, came from China is where the procurement happened, but they had to come to the United States to get to Barbados. And then you were able to retail those face masks for, let's say, for argument's sake, $5 per face mask. Here in Barbados, I think it was at the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute, they had looked at creating face masks, and face shields rather, and they would have had to retail one of those for $45 Barbados. I don't know any right-thinking individual who would say, well, no, yeah, home drums beat first. And I have to feed my children, but I'm going to buy this face shield for $45. Not going to happen.
And that is a conundrum of trade for small countries like ours. One of the things, and I think this is something that we are working on and will continue to press, we have to be able to build enterprises at scale where the unit cost is going to contribute to consumer welfare and not consumer robbery. And this is not deliberate robbery. It is that if you're producing too few units, the per unit cost is going to be higher.
Of course.
So the challenge we have is how are we going to transition a small enterprise to a big enterprise where the unit costs will drop if their own domestic markets will not buy the product when they're small. They'll never get big. So this is why at the CARICOM level, and this happens in COTED, which I represent Barbados at the COTED meetings, and we discuss the whole issue of trade and economic development, and looking at the conditions that will help us to build large regional enterprises. Now, what is that going to take? One, it means that you have to be able to free up investment in the region, that money, significant money, can move and go to a specific place to do a specific thing, whether it is animal feed or whether it is furniture or whatever is the item we think we need to produce. So investment money has to be able to move to be able to build to scale. You then have to educate your consumer. You cannot win the trade war without engaging your consumer. You have to educate your consumer that now what we want you to do is to buy regional products. We want you to buy your own local products. But you then have to impress on your businesses and on the management and on the workers in that business that one of the things you must do is be as efficient as you can and build a quality product that is not only suitable for the tables in Barbados, but for the tables of the region. Now, what is a problem for us here is that very often, because we protect our enterprises, they adopt a policy sometimes of, instead of fixing an efficiency problem, instead of fixing a staff performance problem, you ought to allow the inefficiency to continue and increase the price to the consumer in order to continue making profit, although you have an item that may not be able to trade. And this is an issue.
But even bringing it closer to home, which you mentioned, right, in terms of the region, why is transportation, just the transportation of goods within the region, sometimes so prohibitive?
Volume, scale. It's the same problem. And that is why in the Barbados position, Barbados has two issues. We have no diversification of our markets, and we don't have sufficient diversification of product. And once you have those two things, you will always be vulnerable. So one of the things that you have to be able to encourage, whether it's goods or services that you're focusing your enterprises on, you have to help them to identify new areas to produce and to win. Now, part of the challenge is that the average Barbadian entrepreneur does tend to be risk averse.
That's right.
This is a challenge. And that is because we have not grown up where trade and business is dinner table talk. What too often the Barbadian child hears at his dinner table is, God, I worked so hard today. Gee whiz, that lady came in here and gave me so much trouble. My boss was so mean to me. And so what happens is they never hear the joy of work. But
apart from that, I don't think they hear a lot of entrepreneurship talk and be your own boss.
That's right.
I don't think that they hear a lot of talk about investing. They might hear a lot of talk about saving, but certainly not investing.
I think that one of the things then, and this is why your education platform is so important, if your education platform is not designed to give you the type of entrepreneur, the type of worker that you need, then your economic thrust in trade cannot occur. So you have to have that alignment between those two things in order to produce the quality human resource that is going to allow you to be global, competitive, and innovative.
Right.
And that's the journey that we're on as a country now. And we have not, despite COVID, despite the challenges, we have not shifted from that agenda. And so we have worked, negotiated in order to be able to get the resources to still continue to give our children the opportunity to have coding camps, to be able to learn how to do coding in school. I was so pleased to hear 2 days ago that at one of our secondary schools you can learn green engineering. Now, why is that important? Because now the world is finally acknowledging that climate change is a major issue, and if we do not make swift changes to how we produce goods and how we do things, we are going to make it impossible for small island nations like ours to even exist as a viable nation. Right. That is what is at risk.
So then we need a school system that develops international citizens.
There you go.
Right.
Yes.
And at what age do we start that? We don't start that when they're 18. We should be starting it when they're 3 and 4.
When they hit nursery, that's where you start. And therefore, If we can develop green engineering students, then they can help us repurpose and reposition our enterprises so that we are using sustainable ways of producing. Because you would have heard, for example, that the EU is thinking of putting out a carbon tax. So if your manufacturers are using too much fossil fuels or unsustainable ways of production, they're going to put a tax on you. And we could be on the wrong side of that door if we don't start that process of transitioning. So to hear that students in our schools were beginning to learn green engineering, that brought a smile to my face.
So when we come back, we're going to talk about that. When we look at the conference, what are some of those major things that we want to make sure we assess and see a shift? Our UNCTAD conversation continues right after this. Welcome back to UNCTAD Conversations. I know that you are passionate about the future of this country and the children and the young people who will be charged to take it forward. So when you even think about UNCTAD in the context of Barbados' children, what are you hoping for in terms of the outcomes?
In terms of UNCTAD and outcomes, I'll share this personal thought with you. Whenever I do what I'm doing in relation to foreign trade, I'm always thinking of how it's going to impact our little ones and how important it is that as a nation we give them the type of platform that supports and nurtures them appropriately. One of the things that we want UNCTAD to be able to do for our youth is to give them a vision for being global, to understand that they can compete with the best in the world, to understand that they can be creative and innovative and contribute to what should the future of Barbados and the future for developing countries look like. That's one of the reasons why we have the Youth Forum, to give them the opportunity to bring to the table what are those things that they need to see in their future, because that information now has to guide us as countries to establish economies that have as a part of it a youth economy program. How are we going to take the hopes and dreams and the abilities of our children and create the platforms on which they can practice, innovate, compete, and be able to see themselves as being viable in the wider world? And therefore it is important, even within COVID, one of the things I would love to see is that we have class exchanges using the online platforms where children have classes together with somebody from another country, from another culture, so that they begin to see, I know just as much as that child does. Hey, okay. And that helps them to build the confidence to operate on a global platform. And that is one of the things. The second thing that's going to be important, when we're looking at one of the areas that we've negotiated, is the issue of economic development financing, financing for SMEs, for micro enterprises, because that's where a lot of our young people will start. More of our young people today are interested in starting their own business. And we have to give them the type of support and help that allows that business to grow. Yeah. And therefore, we have to come up with the work programs that will allow UNCTAD over the next 4 years to be able to assist us in developing the policy positions, the analysis, help us with the technical assistance and training for people here in this country to be able to lay out a platform for our youth. Yeah. This is important, and we owe it to them to give them the very best Barbados and the very best global environment in which Barbados can thrive so that their dreams can become a reality. And
I want that for every child in this country.
Yes.
There are some children who would have more access, easier access. So then how do we reach those children who may not in their household or within their families have that level of mentorship and encouragement so that they too have equal opportunity?
This is a big concern to me because what would have happened over the past, say, 20, 30 years as our society became more complex, more time consuming, it has made it very, very difficult for people to do things like volunteering like they used to in the old days. What would happen is that a child, if it was in a dysfunctional situation, some other adult who was not necessarily a relative, but cared for children, would pluck that child from that environment and see to it that that child got what it needed, so that our tertiary level socializing institutions used to help complete the job that maybe parents did not complete or their environment did not complete. You had those socializing institutions like your Girl Guides, your Scouts, your this club, art club, drama club, whatever, and other adults help to play the role of mentoring. Now, how are we going to re-engage that? We have here in Barbados, for example, a number of people who've retired early. They still have a lot to give. What we need is someone to be able to coordinate the opportunities for engagement, who will set up the systems and allow and invite them to come in and be able to nurture a child. You know how many people I meet that said, Sandra, you know, I would love to do something with young women, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know where to start because they don't know where to find them. They don't know, well, do I have permission to say I'm going to go and start a girls' club? And do I have permission to approach a parent? On what basis am I going to approach them and say, I'm qualified to help your daughter?
Right.
They don't know. But if we, those of us who are in the civil society, who understand that, can start and create the structures for those people to play in, we would find ourselves with a cadre of young retirees who would be willing to engage our children around a number of things.
But we don't have to look far. Only recently I was having a conversation around the Barbados Association of Retired Persons, which, interestingly enough, the name, you know, people think retired person, but the fact of the matter is that BARP has massive untapped energy, potential,
Yes, it does.
influence, you know, you name it, in terms of exactly what you were saying, the ability to be able to reach those young people and exact a level of mentorship that we will all be so much better for.
Yes, and I think that it is something that can be managed and coordinated, and I think it would be extremely helpful because to be truthful, many young parents are overwhelmed. They want their children to do good. They just don't know how to create the environment that supports their child to get there.
Yeah.
They're just hoping it will happen.
We have 1 minute left, and anything else that you would like to add?
I just want to encourage Barbadians to get involved. You should be able to go on the website and sign up to say that you want to participate. It means that you can attend the sessions, see what is being said. You know, you can, if you have a group of people who are passionate around a particular topic, encourage them to come. And then when the conference is over, let's talk about where do we go from here. How are we going to take those things that we have discussed and translate them into meaningful things? Now, what Barbados is busy doing at the moment, we are having engagements with a number of different international agencies, and there's some that have made provisions that will allow us to engage civil society in a new way. And we want to be able to hear what is it they need and to be able to work with our international partners to secure the resources and the opportunities that will allow them to put initiatives on the ground that can be transformative for our nation.
Thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on a successful bid, because that's where it all started. And we certainly look forward to the outcomes. And like you said, how we can all certainly get more involved. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This UNCTAD conversation was with the Honorable Sandra Husbands, Minister in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And this was another session of UNCTAD Conversations.